Let us start for today's session. Am I audible to you?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. Before we recap yesterday's session, Naga may join. Yes. Yesterday we discussed about SQL Server databases. A database in Microsoft is a collection of database objects. So those objects are tables, views, indexes, stored procedures, and triggers. The database is a repository where the data will be the sum of tables. Whenever we need from the application, we could able to read the data. We can keep a relations between one or more objects. So in SQL Server, we have two types of databases. One is system databases, the other one is user databases. System databases, those will come with SQL Server installation. These system databases contains system level information. In SQL Server, we have masters, model, MSDB, MDB, and these are the system databases which we can see in SQL Server database object pane. So apart from these four, we do have a hidden database that is called a resource database. And coming to the other type of databases, that is user database. So user database based on the request and based on our need, we will create a database for our data save purpose. It can be payroll, sales, employee details. So a database can a application that those database can hold the data for one application or multiple applications. So coming to the system databases, so master records all the system level information for the SQL Server system. So it contains all the SQL Server level information like instance level, properties, what are the details, what we are seeing in a SQL Server instance, configuration, everything it will be saved in a master database. So it contains all the logins, SQL Server session information, database files details, all the SQL Server related server information, configuration information, everything it will be logged in a master database. So if you see our startup parameters, we do have -d, -c, -l. -d refers master's data file, -l refers master log file. So that indicates that whenever the SQL Server is starting up, it will reach the data from master files and it is coming up. So without master database, SQL Server will not come online. So SQL Server will not function. Whereas coming to model database, the model database is actually a template. It contains more than 1500 objects, and these templates will be moved whenever we create a new database. So these objects will be copied to the newly created database. So if we can specify our database options, a database will be created with the provided configuration. Else a default templates will be copied from the model database. So we cannot configure a new database with less than the threshold value that is mentioned in model database. Let us say for model database, the data file size will be mentioned as 2 MB and log file that will be 1 MB. So we cannot create a new database beyond that value. The other database is MSDB, Microsoft database. This Microsoft database contains all the SQL Server agent related information, and it contains jobs, alerts, agent, operators, and all the SQL Server agent related information. If the MSDB database is not functional, SQL Server database engine will remain functional and SQL Server agent will go down. And the next system database is TempDB. As we discussed yesterday, TempDB holds all the temporary information. It's a global database. So the operations, the users who all are using a SQL Server, for those sessions, TempDB will be used commonly. The objects in a TempDB are temporary until the SQL Server restart or the operation complete. These temporary objects starts with hash or double hash, local temporary object or global temporary object. So even in TempDB, we can create a user data, but whenever the SQL Server restart, TempDB will be dropped and freshly created. So ideally, TempDB contains temporary user data, system data, hash values, and one type of, based on the isolation level, it keeps off isolation related data TempDB contains. So along with our system databases, masters, model, MSDB, we do have a resource database. Resource database is a hidden database, so we cannot see that in a object pane. So that is a read-only database. So it contains, like a master database, it contains system objects of a SQL Server. So the only difference here is, even though the data that appear in database objects, logically it will save in system databases or user database, but those related physically saved in resource database. So because of that, whenever we do upgrades or modification, those system level components or those upgrades will be reflected in resource database. With this implementation, so whenever we want to have a rollback, okay, so it's easy to do a rollback. So this resource database is started introduced in SQL Server 2008. So from SQL Server 2008, so 2005, it's already introduced. From SQL 2008 onwards, we have an option to uninstall any updates, service pack or hotfixes. Okay, so yesterday we have seen a demonstration for importance of each system database. So what will happen if master database goes down, and similarly model, MSDB, and TempDB resource database. Correct. So it's mandatory to have all the system databases up and healthy functional to have a SQL Server operational. Correct. So before we jump on to the other database related components, so do you have any questions on system databases and the importance of the system database?
Yeah, no doubts. Yeah. Srinivas, and we are waiting for the yesterday's recording class. We didn't get till now.
Yes, yesterday's one, I think there was a technical challenge. The recording was hung. So maybe Dharma will he will be sending along with today's session.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. So today right now we have 5 participants. Um, Ashwita, Naga, Pooja, Sirisha, 4 participants, including me. Okay, so I just wanted to understand here. I'm trying to connect. Okay, so I am unable to connect to the SQL server. I just wanted to hear from you, like at least one answer. What are the possible reasons to fail to connect SQL Server instances? What could be the reasons? In which cases we will fail to connect the SQL Server instance? Let me start. Uh, the one possible thing is when the SQL services are not running. When the SQL services are not running, SQL currently down, we will not be able to connect the SQL services. One. Ashwita, can you tell in which scenarios we may not able to connect the SQL server? What could be the possible reasons?
Yeah, I was able to do, but only my login mail is not working.
Sorry?
It is working, but the problem is like I'm not able to get my username and password.
Yes. Okay. We'll keep aware. I mean, aside your ongoing issue, so that is also an answer. So whenever we don't have credentials to the database instance, we cannot able to connect to the SQL Server instance. And Naga, can you tell?
Yeah, if you make any changes in master database, that is also one reason we cannot connect to the SQL server.
Correct. So the master database is corrupt, or those files is inaccurate. SQL server goes down automatically. We cannot able to connect the SQL server instance. Sirisha,
I think Sirisha left.
Sirisha left. Pooja,
Like login fail, like for username.
yes, that was covered by Ashwita.
Or TCP IP disable.
Yes, exactly. When we are trying to connect to SQL Server remotely, the TCP IP is disabled. The SQL Server browser will not allow connection, right? So when we are authenticating from the database server from a client remotely, we need to have a TCP IP enabled. The other possible reasons is invalid instance name. If I try
ID
to
password.
yes, ID password, then nothing but a login and credentials, and improper instance name. And if I'm using a wrong port number, like if it is a dynamic port number, okay. So after the SQL Server restart, Windows box restart, a new port will be assigned. If you are tried with the old port, it will continue to fail.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So Sirisha, I think you have rejoined. Any answer from your end?
If there is any change in the configuration settings or something.
What you mean by, what kind of
In
changes
the
in the configuration manager?
like in the ports protocols or something in connecting the protocols.
Yes, that is correct. When you had a drop off, Pooja had covered that. So
Okay.
any more?
Stop mode, when you put it in stop mode.
That I have started. If the services are not running, we cannot able.
Okay. Pass also possible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, services, it can be
Everything
anything,
will
start,
come.
stop, or yeah, everything will be coming under that
Oh,
scenario.
okay.
So one is services, other one is protocols, that is port number and TCP IP. Other thing is valid instance name. The other fourth one is permissions to the SQL Server instance.
Okay.
So anyone of any other possible reasons? Okay, we will see whenever we encounter. So in your machines, whenever you are not able to connect to your SQL server, so most of us, we are connecting locally. That means TCP/IP protocol might not be the issue. Apart from TCP/IP, just validate these three things: services, whether the SQL related services are running fine or not. Okay, so the next thing is, are we using correct SQL Server instance name? Okay, whether are we connecting with SQL authentication or Windows authentication? So, and also it's mandatory to check whether in which mode the SQL Server is configured. Let us say my SQL is configured to connect only Windows authentication. If I try to connect with SA password, SA user or SQL authentication, will continue to fail. Correct? So I'm not keeping that as a separate point because that is a credentials or configuration. So that comes under our SQL Server credentials. So this four, before we come to a conclusion there is an issue in connectivity, we just check these four and then we can figure out where could be the issue. Okay. So Ashwita, you are telling like you are unable to connect to the server, right? So from these 4 points, so what could be the possible reasons in your scenario? You just have a look. Okay. So we will discuss that at the end of the session.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yes. So the system databases, I think we are good in system databases, master model, MSDB, TempDB, and a new database. It's as a database administrator, we mainly work on system level objects. So other day when we are discussing about the responsibilities of logical DBA and physical DBA, the physical DBA mainly works on system objects. So he will not update the system objects. By reading the data from system objects, we will operate the SQL Server instance. If I want to know what are the databases and what sizes when it was created, to find that I use a system object to read the data. Right? Whereas the physical logical DBA, he will create the object in a user database and he will make use of the data in a user database.
I have a small doubt. Should we always use the Windows authentication mode for running a query?
It's not mandatory that authentication should be either Windows or mixed. That is for a connection to the SQL Server. Either you can use Windows connection or SQL connection.
It doesn't ask for any username or password. With SQL Server, it asks for a username and password, right?
Correct.
Why is that so?
Yes. Why is that? If you remember, if you can recall our initial discussions, so we told like SQL authentication is a non-trusted and Windows connections are trusted connections.
Okay.
So whereas in a SQL authentication, what will happen at the time of connecting the SQL server, your credentials are authenticated. Let me see. Let me show you one more example for it.
Can we always use the Windows authentication mode to run a query?
Yes, that is not executing or working with the SQL server is depending upon the rights we have on the SQL server instance. So if your login is the SQL authenticated and if your login is having a credentials to your database, you can able to. Similarly, if the login is Windows, if the Windows login have sufficient rights to access the database, you can able to.
Okay. How can we know that whether it will have the access or not?
Yes, that will be covered in the module called security.
Okay.
So still we didn't go till that concept.
Okay.
select star from this login. When you hit this query, select star from sys login. As soon as I hit, you are seeing bunch of logins. And also if you are seeing here password. Okay, so for name, if you see here user ID and password. For Windows authenticated accounts, the password is null. For SQL authenticated, let's concentrate on SQL authenticated essay. The password is specified as some encrypted form. Similarly, we will see Windows authentication. For Windows authentication, the password is null. Correct. So if you are using SQL Server instance, it will authenticate when you are trying to connect to the SQL Server. Your password is saving in SQL Server. Whereas when you are trying to use Windows authentication, SQL Server will not authenticate because SQL Server will not keep the password. Your authentication will be happen at the OS level. In the NTLM or Kerberos protocol level, your authentication will be accepted and that will be interlinked with the SQL Server. That's the reason whenever you are using Windows authentication, it will not prompt you to re-enter the password because you have a Windows credentials, it inherit to the SQL Server as well. So whereas coming to SQL authentication, that SQL authentication, the password is saved in the SQL Server that will be authenticated when you try to connect while making a SQL Server Management Studio. Is it clear why we are entering in Windows SQL authentication? Why not in Windows authentication? Because in SQL authentication, user ID password will be saved in SQL Server. So that is the reason trusted, non-trusted. So there are chances that people can hack this, can read the password. So there are tools in the market to decode the password. Okay, let us come back. So we were discussing like databases. We have two types of databases. Actually, what it contains, where the data is saving. When we say the data is saving in a database, so in what form it is saving, where it is saving, correct? So the data we are saving in the form of tables in a database. Fine, but what the database contains, where the database is residing, is this residing somewhere? Let us say I want to save a few details. Let us say I want to track of my students and their resume details. So what I will do, I thought of keeping a notepad or WinWord. I will save it. So my data is saved in a notepad or WinWord in a physical location. Okay, if I know that my data is available in C drive or D drive. Similarly, in a database, the data will be saved in tables. Like that, how we are saving in a database, it will be in the form of files. Those files will be residing physically on the disk. So yesterday while we are working on our lab sessions, we have seen few database files after the installation, data directory. Let me open it. So if you go to data directory, here you have seen these files. These are the files for our system databases. That means our database, the data in the database are saved in database files, correct, and a physical location. What are those files are called? Those files are called data file and log file. So a database contains a data file and log file. So the data files are with the extension .mdf or ndf, and the log file with the extension of ldf. When you are creating a database, it's mandatory to have at least one or more data file. Similarly, at least one or more log file. The minimum criteria to create a database is at least we should have one data file, one log file. So that mandatory data file is MDF, that is called primary data file. Okay, so apart from that, let us say if you want to have a more huge database, okay, then you can expand the database by adding new files to it. Okay, let us keep in our general scenarios. In our school days, we will be having a different subject: mathematics, science, social, right? If you take social studies, so in that we will be having, even though in that we will be keeping one book for social studies, and we will be dividing the social studies in four parts: geography, history, like that, correct? So in one book we are saving the data and we are dividing it multiple parts. If we consider our database like a book, the data we are writing inside the book in pages. Similarly, in a database we are having a files to save the data. So inside the files, what is exactly where it is saving? In the form of pages, our data is saved. So whenever we say that we are saving the data in a database, that means the data physically it is saved onto the disk. In a disk, that file contains page. That page we cannot read it. SQL Server will fetch the data from pages. So those pages are nothing but the database file which is residing on physical location. When we see the database files, these database files, the data inside the database files are saved in the form of pages. So class 1 notes will be written on the page 1. Once page 1 complete, we will turn it PTO and we will go back to page 2. Once page 2 complete, page 3. Similarly, when we start entering to the data in a database, it will write into the page. Once the page is complete, next page will be allocated. Next page will be allocated. It will be keep on allocating until we have a space. Correct? So don't get confused. So you are telling like data will be saved in a database. Now you are telling data will be saved in a page. Correct? So inside what in a database, where exactly the data is getting saved, so that we cannot see the page, we can see the file. So a database should have one or more database files, that is data file, primary data file, and log file. So a database file with the extension of MDF and log file extension of LDF. So as we said, a database can have one or more files. So depending upon the need, we can create one or more database files. The first file extension would be MDF. The rest of the files would be automatically, it will take LDF. For log file, if we create a number, the extension would be LDF only. Okay, so when we go to our lab scenario, I will explain little more on this. So let us discuss on theoretical concepts. So a database files contains pages. Actually, page is nothing but a media where the data is saving in SQL Server. So group of pages is called extent. A group of pages is called extent. A extent contains 8 pages. So SQL Server, what it will do, whenever SQL Server database needs to write a data onto the page, it will not extend a single page. It will assign a extent. Right? If we consider rows in our book, like in a page we are having line number 1, row number 2, like that, right? So not a, let's say it's not a plain paper, it's a rule paper. So what will happen, once you are done with first row, you will come to second row, you will write it, right? So when the sheet 1 complete, you will look for next row or next sheet. Obviously we will turn into next page and we will start in the first row of this page 2. Similarly, SQL Server will give a extent whenever it required, not on a page. So extent is nothing but a group of pages. So let us come back from root to the top. So a database contains pages. A group of pages is called extent. Okay, a group of extents is called a file, that is called a data file. Group of files is called file group. File group and log file will be residing on a database. So now when we say we are creating a database, we are creating a database files. Those files will be residing on the disk, so that whenever we insert the data, whenever we create a database objects, those objects will be saved in the disk in the form of tables. So as we discussed, page is the place where the data is actually saved. A page is a size of 8 KB. So extent is called 8 pages. 8 pages is called a extent. That means the size of extent is 8 into 8, 64 kilobytes. In the slide, you can see how a extent would be. Okay. So in extent, we have 2 types of extents. One is mixed extent, other one is uniform extent. So mixed extent is nothing but in that extent, in that 8 pages, the data related to the same object. Uniform extent, the data in those pages are related to, uniform extent is related to the same object, whereas mixed extent is related to the multiple objects. Okay, so let us say I have table 1, table 2, table 3. So if my extent is a mixed, in that extent the data can be any table's data. So whenever the table 2 requires, the corresponding data can be written onto that extent. Table 3 requires, table 3 data will be saved in the same extent, since that is a mixed, that is common for all. So yeah, like if we compare with our book, so along with our dedicated book to each subject, we will assign a common book for all the subjects, like a rough notes. So what we'll do, in the rough notes, whenever we need any subject, any topic, we will make use of that rough book. Correct? Similarly, it's a mixed extent. It will keep track of the data. It can be related to any object. Whereas the uniform extent, the data related to the same object, like if extent is allocated for a table 1, that extent contains only table 1 data. Once the extent is filled, a new extent will be assigned. In the new extent, the same table 1 data only saved. So this is just a difference between uniform and mixed extent. This is just for an interview purpose. Nowhere we will see page, nowhere we will work on a extent. That is the internal concept where the SQL Server data is actually saving. Whenever we create a data, like whenever we insert data into a table, database object, actually it is saving in a page. So a page will be assigned in the form of extent. Just a theoretical concept, just for knowledge purpose. A page, a group of pages is called a extent. A group of extents is a file. A group of files is called file group. A database should have a data file and log file. The mandatory data file is called a primary data file with the extension of .mdf. If you create any other data file to the database, those are called secondary database files. Those secondary database files are one or more depending upon the version. We can create 259 database files. Okay, that is depending upon our need. So not only in the same location, we can create in multiple location. So log file extension is .ldf. We can create one or more LDF files. Primary data file. Data file contains the startup information of the database and pointers to other files. What my master database contains? Master database contains all the SQL Server information and other database information, right? Similarly, in a database, metadata, student ID card, my file in department, it contains all the information. ID card contains metadata of the student. Similarly, in a database itself can hold some information. That information will be saved in primary database file. That means it can keep track of what is the data of my database and how many files my database have. So along with your master database, your metadata also will be saved in your database in primary data file. Secondary file can be used to spread the user data across multiple disks by keeping in different drive locations. So I want to expand my database. Let us say people will say database size is huge, like our Gmail and Facebook. Every day the storage will be added to the systems and it will be keep on growing. That means the data in the database is growing. So to manage the database, they have to keep on adding to the data storage to that. So where they will add, they cannot keep in the same location, right? Let us say your C drive is full. What you will do? You will add an external hard disk, or else you will keep additional hard drive with a more storage, and you will make it as a D drive or else C drive. Correct. So or else if it is a VM server, you will expand the drive. Similarly, if the database needs to be grown, means that we have to provide sufficient space to it. Rather than keeping the same location, let us say my C drive is having 40 GB. Once 40 GB is grown, utilized, it cannot grow it. Let us say if the drive is available, D drive or E drive is available, we can make use of that. So if we add a file in other drives, SQL Server database start growing it. So adding a second file is nothing but secondary file, that is with the extension .ndf. A transaction log file. Log file holds all the information that is used to recover the database. So log file will not contain any data. It contains just information that is used to recover the database. Okay. So let us discuss all these concepts in the lab scenario. Okay, like what we discussed, a database contains database means it should have a data file and log file. Correct? Yes. We will compare the existing database and we will see the newly creating database as well. So I am checking sp underscore help dbf1 database, that is master. Okay, fine. When I hit master database, I got two files. A database name is master with the size 4.75 and the owner is SA and DB ID is 1. When you come into second session, it has files name, field ID 1, name, field ID 2, the location, file group, correct? And if you see the last column, what it says, uses data only, log only. So a database should have one data file and one log file. Okay, the data file is MDF, that is called primary data file. So in this case, field 1, that is a primary database, that is database file, that belongs to file group called primary file group. Yes, coming back, the second one is log file. A database should have a file with the extension of LDF. See, master in the physical location, file group master, log file will not have file group and that uses as log. Okay, if I want to create one more file to database, that means by adding a database file, that is called secondary database file. Already primary data file will come along with your database creation. The extension of the database file is .mdf. Able to see master.mdf, master.ldf. So if you recall our startup parameters, -d, -e, -l, -d, -d stands for master data file, master, L stands for master log file. So when we say while SQL Server coming up, the data is fetching from master. Master means master database contains two files. Those are primary data file and log file. Let us say if I add secondary data file to it, when we will add say, new file it, when we buy a new book, when will we assign a new book to the same subject? When it comes to end, correct? When it is fully utilized. Similarly, when my master database is grown and completely fill the disk space, then I will assign a new file to that. Correct. So that is the important. That's the reason we are keeping data file, log file, and error log to record their errors if there any errors while starting up. So we will see a new database creation. So right click on a database, select new database. Okay, so whenever we try to create a database, few of the mandatory things: what kind of name you are giving and where you are going to save. So we know right now the database contains files. Those files will be saving in a physical location. And what kind of files those are? Data file and log file. Okay, I am creating a database called practice database class. Okay, so by default, who creating the database? He will be the owner of the database. Okay, and for that, a database should have a data file, minimum of one or more one data file, and minimum of one log file. If you want more, you can keep it, but minimum is one database file should be there. So see, logical name automatically came. It contains rows, that means data that belongs to primary. Initial size is 2 MB. This we will discuss. Okay, if you see path, in which location we are going to keep that database file. I am giving a location to keep the database files. I am browsing to newly location. SQL DBA practice database is keeping a database file. Coming to log file, giving a log file directory. Okay, so when I click OK, what will happen? A database will be created with the name SQL class. That is the name I have given for a new database, and for that the data file, primary data file .mdf will be created in the path D SQL DBA practice data file location. Log file will be created in it. Okay, so let me click once. Before run, I am taking a script. Here you will have a options to script out the operation. New query window or file, you can save the script to a file. Okay, I'm scripting to a new window. What I can do, I can do this operation by using GUI or else by using a query analyzer. Query analyzer nothing but a command prompt based tool. Here we'll go back, we'll keep this. Okay, those are the database level options. So, create database name on primary. What is the primary? Primary belongs to a file group. By default, a primary file is a member of file group. What is a file group? File group is nothing but one or more group of files is called a file group. A default file group is the primary file group. That means a database should have one data file, that is primary data file. That primary data file belongs to primary file group. If you create any data file, that is called secondary data file. The secondary database file can be of the same file group or it can be any new file group. So for while creating a database, we provided a database file, name for that file, and the location where that file needs to be saved, and then I have given a specification. So how much size initially should have, how many size should it increase. Okay, why it is required. So why it is required? So when I'm creating a database, initially we will not have data in it. So when my application start using it, the data will residing on it, right? So automatically my database will grow. When we initially start using of mobile phone, the external storage will be empty, right? Once we start using it, so the external storage SD card will start filling with our data. It can be WhatsApp photos, or it can be downloads, or whatever it is. So what we are doing, by expecting the future growth, the usage of our phone, we are buying either 4 GB or 8 GB or 16 GB, 32 GB of external memory card, and we are using in our mobile phone. Correct? And also we are not giving at a time 32 GB to one application. We are giving that entire 32 GB external storage for all the applications. In that case, what is happening? Whenever we download, whenever we send a file in WhatsApp, or whenever we download a file in WhatsApp, what will happen? Corresponding file or picture will be saved in WhatsApp folder. Similarly, any other application, Viber or any other application, what will happen? The corresponding data will be saved in your external hard disk. So what is happening eventually? Your data in your SD memory card is keep on increasing, and not at a time we are giving the maximum full storage to one application. Whenever it need, it is growing. Correct? And similarly, in the database, whenever you are creating a database, it's mandatory to estimate how much space you required for your database, what kind of data we are loading into the database. Okay, how many years my database will reside. Okay, after 1 year, what would be the expected size? So this kind of calculation is required. So when we calculate the database size and growth and the number of users can be used, right? So let us say school record. For school record, some extent of storage is required. Let us say bank. So how can I create a same size of database for bank application and a school related database? No, right? Because in a school the transactions are very less. So when at the time of school joining time, there will be more writes. Later, very limited number of insertions, because in the mid of the year where there will be less chance of new students to join. Okay, so that's the reason. When you compare to bank, there are very less chances of season. Depending upon the customer need, people will come and join. Okay, and also the growth will be more. So depending upon my need, I have to estimate the size of the database. Okay, and also the second thing is that if I am creating a database for an application, it's always better to give the data, let the database grow from low to high. That means initially, rather than giving 30 GB for WhatsApp, so none of the applications can use the storage. This 30 GB will be reserved for your WhatsApp application, but actually your WhatsApp doesn't require 30 GB. In the same time, any other application needs the storage, you cannot download, right? If you have internal storage, you can download in your internal phone memory. If the internal phone memory also exists, what it will prompt? So you don't have free memory to download it. So if you don't restrict to one application, whenever it required, if you keep like a let it grow, so that the required storage will be shared among multiple drives. So if you see here in the current diagram, so when we create a database, what is happening? The templates are copying from model database. So around 1500 objects are getting copied from model database. At the time initially the database size is 3 MB. So my database is growing. Once 3 MB is complete, we are allocating some storage, some space. It is going again. After that cross, again we are allocating. That is called auto growth. Whenever you comes to maximum space, you automatically grow. That option is called auto growth. That auto growth, either we can specify a percentage, how much automatically my database should grow, either 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. The percentage we can specify, or else every time whenever my database is reached to its maximum value, assign 1 GB to it. Let us say currently my database is 4 GB. Once 4 GB size is crashed, another 1 GB is assigned to my database. Now my database can grow till 5 GB. After 5 GB, 1 more GB will be assigned, that is 6 GB. After 6 GB, 1 more GB will be assigned, 7 GB. If we assign like a percentage, 10%, that means 10% on 4 GB, that is 0.04 MB will be assigned. Next time, it will be assigned on the sum of 4 plus 0.04 MB. Next time again 4% in that value it will be assigned. So that is up to our database users. We can give value or the percentage for auto growth. So when you keep the auto growth, the database automatically increase the size whenever it requires. So that's the reason, if you see here, we are giving a size that is minimum size, okay, that is current size, and file growth. Okay, while creating a database, we have specified our database files. Those are data file and log file, data file location and data file size, data file auto growth. Similarly, log file location, log file initial size, log file auto growth. If I give these values, what would be the initial value? What would be the growth? The configured values it will allow. Else default values will be taken from which database?
Database.
Sorry?
Model database.
Correct. So the default values will be taken from model. So when in this screen create a GUI, database creation GUI, we haven't specified auto growth values, right? Automatically these default values are coming. Okay. So if I don't keep auto growth, what will happen? Naga, can you guess what will happen? Yes, it is not going to grow. After the available size, from the screen we can see the initial size is 2 MB for data file and 1 MB for log file. So once the database reaches that 3 MB, it's not going to grow. So if we keep enable auto growth, the database will be continuously, it will grow until available disk space. Okay, let me cancel it. In this case, what I am doing here what I did, at a time initially I am allocating more space to the database. I am not letting the database grow whenever it is required. What I am telling is, don't to grow. I am fixing the database size. So once the database is utilizing this, it cannot grow it. Initially only I allocated my database size. So that is up to you how you are going to customize the database. If you know the users of the database, we can initially create a database of the minimum size and let it grow based on the requirement. Okay. In the database, I specified data file location, log file location. A database should have minimum of one data file, that is MDO file I specified. Similarly, log file I specified, initial size I specified, file growth I specified. If I specify maximum size means it cannot grow beyond that value, 100 GB. So once the database reaches 100 GB, even though auto growth is enabled, SQL Server will not assign new storage. That means new storage means new pages. New pages means new extents. My SQL Server storage engine will not allocate new storage to the database once it reaches to the maximum value. Clear?
Yes.
Yes. So you can create a database by using TSQL or GUI. Both are same. I am running this query. I am parsed it. Parsing is nothing but checking the syntaxes. Okay. Execute. I am executing by clicking F5 or execute button. I executed. As soon as I execute, command completed. I am refreshing my databases. Refresh in SQL classes. What SQL classes contain? We'll see what is the size, who created, what time created, sp underscore help db. Typo mistake. HCLP help db. sp underscore help db. So as soon as I create a database, the database entry will be added in our master database system table. System databases. Do you remember in yesterday's demonstration we see here? So whenever I create a database, a entry is added in our system database catalog. That is master catalog. See, a database created, a database new unique. If I want to create a database with the same name, will my SQL Server allow?
No.
Okay, why?
It is going to show that the name already existed.
Okay. So because in my how my SQL service come to know whether that name exists or not? Because before we create a new database, it referring to our system database system object whether the database is available or not. That the database is already exist or not. If not, it will allow us to take that name, and also it will use a unique object database ID. 1 for master, 2 for MSDB, 3 for model, 4 for MSDB. Whenever you create a new database ID is getting generated. Okay, so if you hit sp underscore help db of the database, you are getting the data. So database files, file location, what kind of file group it is, right? And the size, minimum size, maximum size, what is the growth, and what kind of that file is. So size is current value, that is initial size. Maximum size, if you don't mention, by default it will be unlimited. So but for temp db, for log file, it will be 2 TB, it will come by default value. And growth, if you see here, Either growth can be value or the percentage. If you give a value, whenever database reaches the 2 MB, 1 MB will be assigned to my data file. Whereas coming to log file, whenever it reaches 1 MB of size, 10% additional storage will be assigned. 10% of 1 MB will be assigned. Correct?
Yeah.
Yes. So when I create a database, when I create an object in a database where the object related data is saved, so we will create a database object. What is a database object? These are tables, views, store procedures, triggers, all these called database objects. So I am creating a one table, that is I am creating a table with the name, experience, phone number, and the company and address. Okay. So with this name, I am creating a table. I created a employee data. I wanted to save my employee data, so I created a table. This operation can be done using TSQL or GUI. By writing a create table name, the syntax you can do it, or else like GUI you can do it. So now I am giving data in my database. Where it is saving?
Saving
Where it is going to save?
in the table.
Correct. Where the table is available?
Employee data.
In the SQL class.
So whenever I insert a data in it, the data is actually saving in database. I accept it. But exactly where it is saving in a database? It is saving in page. Correct.
Okay.
So this records will be saved in a page. Where those pages are available? Those pages are nothing but our database files only. The database file contains extents. Extents contains pages. Now all this data is saved in pages. When I execute it, the corresponding data is saved in pages. So you can say how you are telling my data is saved in a page. Is there any way that I can tell you that the data is saved in form of pages?
Extend.
So now I cannot go ahead and read the data from page. From this view, we can see a database objects, files. That is extent and file. Page. That is a internal concept. So by GUI you cannot see it. By writing, by using built-in DM view store procedure, you can able to see how many pages are your data, how many pages created in your database. Okay, so how many pages are free, how many pages are filled with data. That information you can track by using dynamic views or store procedures. That one we will discuss in our future classes. so don't get confused. Whenever we say that the data is saving in a database, actually the data will be saved in a page. A page is nothing but 8 KB. So once that page is filled, it will start writing into the new page. SQL Server will assign a new extent whenever it's required. So it will not, SQL Server database engine will not give one page. Whenever it's required, it will allocate 8 pages. That is one extent. Extents are uniform extent or mixed extents that can be used for one table or a multiple objects. This extents will be in a file, that is a database file. The database is file. A group of files is called a file group. A group of file groups and log file is nothing but database. So this file group extend page, this is only for data file, not for log file. Log file will not contain any data. It contains the information to recover the data. Okay. Okay. Let So I'm not good at drawing. Somehow I try to, yes. Let us say from the drawing, if you take this as the entire database. So here a database should have a data file. Let me take a pencil. So if you take this as an entire database, this database contains what my database contains. My database contains database files and log file. So a database is divided into two portions. That is, portion 1 is a database file. The portion 2 is a log file. Right? A database files is nothing but a group of files. A group of files, that is, one is primary with the extension of MDF. So that file will be extension of MDF, that is a primary database file. This is MDF. Okay. Similarly, database should have a log file that is called
LDF.
If we add one more file to the database, those are called secondary database files. All these are secondary database files. So with the extension of
MDF.
So if you see, a group of files is called a file group. If you see, first one, that is a database should contain a primary data file that belongs to primary file group. Log file will not contain any file group, just it will have a log file. Next, here if you see in the first bunch, this file group have 3 files. 1, 2, 3. Whereas second file group contains 2 files. All these are data files. These are called secondary database files. Whenever my database, so these files in the file group can grow here, this size, this size. Once the database reaches the minimum size to the maximum size, you have to expand the database. How? By adding new file. When you add a new file to it, that is one more NDO file, automatically your database will grow. How it will grow? By specifying the minimum and maximum. Similarly, when a new log file, if the log file is completely grown, you can add one more log file. Okay, so your database files have page extend concept. Okay, so but log file will not have any pages. It will just have the information that's required to recover the database. Auto growth. So auto growth is the feature allowing the database to grow from initial size to the expected size. So this growth can be minimum value or percentage or a particular value. So if you specify a maximum, so we can restrict the database file or database to particular value. Restricted growth. If I don't want to allow my database to grow beyond 50 GB, I can specify the value like 50 GB. Unrestricted means it will grow till the available disk space. Here, if you want to create a database, you need to have a database name and the location where you are going to create. Okay, and what would be the size of the database? If you have any if you don't specify the initial size and auto growth, the percentage, the restriction, by default these values will be taken from model database. By default, the owner of the data, the creation, the person who is creating the database, he will be the owner of the database. Tomorrow we will see the database options. So before we end up, we will see a file group. Since a database contains a file group. Currently my file group have only one file. That is a default file group. When I create a new file, so how can I create? Add file, new data file 1, new data file 1. That is the data, and what it belongs to by default, it belongs to primary file group. If you want to keep in a new file group, you can create a new file group for that, and you can keep the data file in a particular file group. Create new file group or primary file group. Let's see, I am keeping in a primary file group, and I have given a minimum value and auto growth value, the location where it has to go. I'm changing to, since that is a data file, I'm keeping in a data file directory. If I go back and see the properties, in file group, primary file group, how many files are there? 2 files are there. So under the primary data file, we have added 2 files. Correct? But if you run the same statement, for the primary database, we have primary file group, we have 2 files. If you want to keep in your one more file group, you can keep in your own file group. I'll show one diagram for a better understanding here. See, let us say if I want to keep data for monthly wise, okay? January data is going to one location, February data is going to one location, March is going to one file, and next month data will come to one file. I'm not going to read the data from older files. So what I can do is, all the data which is coming in January month, I can make it in one file group. File 2, I'll keep one file in a other file group. March data I'll keep in one file group. So whenever I need, whenever I'm adding a new file, I can create a new file group, I can customize it, and also the data I can keep in different drives. So if I have 3 files, I can keep in 3 locations. So whenever we are creating a database, we need to consider what could be the growth of the database and how much space it is required after 6 months. So if you do a little capacity planning on your database, so that we will not encounter unexpected issues in a production environment. So let us see, in your laptop, in your practice purpose, it's not required. If you think in a real-time scenario, bank is there, so you wanted to deposit some $10,000. Okay, so after entering $10,000, if your database is ran out of space, that means it is not allowing you to do a insert statement or modify statement on the database, how it will be, right? The reputation will go off. So you have to plan accordingly what is the current growth and how much free space I need to accommodate it. Those things we will discuss more detail in capacity planning. So any doubts in today's session? So today we discussed what the database is, what kind of files a database have, and what is a file group, page, extent, auto growth. These are the concepts that we have discussed. So this is nothing but your history book. Just compare each concept with your history book. So I mean, you can easily remember the concept. Files and file groups, nothing but your division in your book. So the data that we are writing in a book, nothing but the data which you are saving in a page. A group of pages is called extent. Okay. So we will discuss little more database options in the tomorrow's class. So if you have any questions in today's session, so please rise. Ashwita, I think in middle you had a drop off, so not sure whether you can able to follow us or not.
Actually, my internet connection was like little poor, so I had to log in from my phone again.
Yeah. So now do you have some clarity on what is database
Yeah, I have
and what
little
kind of files
clarity. Even Dharma will send the recorded session, right? So I can listen to the bit like where I missed.
Sure. Pooja?
Yeah, it's fine till now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, tomorrow we will discuss more about the database options, and then we will continue our course module.
Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.